Welcome. We are in the FEL Priestley Memorial Lectures in the History of Ideas at the Paul Cadario Conference Center. Welcome. My name is Sally Tagliamonte, and I am the acting principal of University College. I'm also a professor of linguistics and a Canada Research Chair in Language Variation and Change. Let us come together on this auspicious occasion with intellectual curiosity, openness to new ideas, and a common goal to learn more about different histories from the Caribbean. But before we delve into the past, I would like to begin with the earth under our feet. I wish to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across North and Central America, a territory called Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I ask that you take a moment to reflect on the Indigenous heritage of the land upon which you live and work, and their histories in the trajectory of human history that has brought us to the present day. The FEL Priestley Memorial Lectures in the History of Ideas were funded by a number of Professor Priestley's former students. The lectures reflect Professor Priestley's broad interest in the history of ideas and his dedication to teaching and scholarship. In this regard, we are extremely honored to have Professor Matthew Smith here with us. Professor Smith is a professor of history and the director of the Center for the Study of the Legacies of British Slavery. He joined University College London after many years of working at the University of the West Indies in Mona in Jamaica, where he was professor of Caribbean history. His research is pan-Caribbean in scope, with special interest in the 19th and 20th century histories of Haiti and Jamaica. Today is the first of 3 lectures, which will focus on Haiti. Tomorrow will be a focus on the Caribbean more broadly, and on Thursday, he will talk about Jamaica. Before we introduce Professor Smith, I want to give you some quick housekeeping notes. For those attending in person, a microphone will be passed around during the question and answer portion of today's lecture, so please raise your hand to ask a question once the lecture concludes. If you speak, please speak into the microphone rather than speaking without one, in order for our audience at home to hear your questions. For those attending virtually, live closed captioning is available for this event. The captioning icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Please use the Zoom chat function to submit your online questions. I'm going to now call upon Professor Melanie Newton to introduce our distinguished speaker from a disciplinary perspective. Professor Newton?
Thank you so much, Professor Tagliamonte, and thank you to UC for this lecture series and for all the hard work, and to Abigail Aponte for the communications back and forth so that we could organize everything together. So it's my immense joy to introduce my friend and colleague, Matthew J. Smith, and to meet his wife, Ishta, who I've heard much about but have never met in person. It's lovely to see you here. Professor Smith is Professor of History at University College London, and it's my pleasure to share this opening evening of his Priestley Lecture Series with you all. At UCL, Professor Smith is Director of the Center for the Study of the Legacies of British Slavery, easily one of the most transformative digital history endeavors of the last 3 decades, which he will discuss with graduate students tomorrow. But for now, I will, rather than going into detail about that, I will focus on telling you a bit about Professor Smith and preparing the ground for his words this evening. Professor Smith completed his BA and MA in history at the University of the West Indies, Mona, the flagship campus of the University of the West Indies system. And if you want a multi-campus university system more complex than U of T, you should look at UWI. He went on to complete his PhD in history at the University of Florida in 2009, but later returned and served as chair of the history department at Mona from 2016 to 19, before moving to his current position at UCL. He's the author of two remarkable monographs on modern Haitian history, 2009's, Liberty, no, I'm gonna get this wrong. Why did I put them backwards? 2014's Liberty, Fraternity, Exile, Haiti and Jamaica After Emancipation, and 2009's Red and Black in Haiti, Radicalism, Conflict, and Political Change. The first one, Liberty, Fraternity, and Exile, which is actually the second book, I for some reason put them backwards in my comments, we'll just move on, won the 2015 Haiti Illumination Book Prize from the Haitian Studies Association, and Red and Black in Haiti won the Caribbean Studies Awards Association's Gordon Kay and Sybil Lewis Award for Best Book. He's the editor and author of countless articles, essays, think pieces, and has multiple edited volumes that range across the Caribbean's histories of slavery and freedom, and unfinished struggles for revolution, emancipation, and decolonization. Among his current research projects is a study of the representations and legacies of the Morant Bay Rebellion in Jamaica in 1865, and the social history of Jamaican popular music since the 1950s. I found out last night at dinner that just because he's not busy enough, I guess, he also writes on popular music and produces documentary films on the side because, you know, why not? Professor Smith works in the finest tradition of critical and publicly engaged Caribbean historical thinkers, keepers of memory, and dreamers of a better future. These are thinkers who were born in one linguistic and former imperial zone of this polyglot region of the world, but who've chosen to reach across the Caribbean Sea and across barriers of empire and language, embracing the complexity of the Caribbean and refusing to accept those boundaries as the limits of our communion as Caribbean people. Thinkers like Professor Smith have never been more important than at this moment of deep crisis and uncertainty for the entire world, but certainly for the Caribbean, where the lights have gone out in Cuba. Haitians continue to be punished for wanting to choose their own government. Dominicans of Haitian ancestry have been rendered stateless, and Puerto Ricans have seen their fellow Americans choose a president who called them garbage. As the Caribbean sits in the eye of the storm of both shifting political winds coming from the north and climate catastrophe, we need, in the words of Kamau Brathwaite, when he lived and worked in Jamaica in 1973, in a different moment of political upheaval, thinkers like Professor Smith, who, in Kamau Brathwaite's words, refashion futures like a healer's hand, and who ouvre barrière pour nous, or open a path for all of us. And in the case of Professor Smith, to think of a different and better relationship with our shared but unequal past. And so, Professor Smith, fellow member of the 74 Club, which you know what that means. It's been 10 years since we last saw each other in person, but I am so delighted to welcome you back to Toronto. And tonight we will hear about a side of Haiti's history that Caribbeanists know, largely because of your work, but which we never see reflected in most contexts in popular media. In Chance and Discordance in 1950s Haiti, Professor Smith will reflect on a moment of great change in Haiti, in which Haitians and other Caribbean people wrestled with how Haiti's proud revolutionary history should be taught and remembered. Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that very, very touching introduction, Melanie. Good evening, everyone. I want to start by offering my own thanks to Melanie, of course, for that introduction, but also to my host who have made this event possible, for inviting me here and hosting me so well. So Sally, Abby, Bonnie, Georgia, everybody who's been responsible for this. I'm delighted to be here. I am not daunted one bit for 3 lectures consecutively. In fact, I'm very excited at the prospect to be able to share with you some of my work and my thought on work that I've been doing in the past, work that I'm currently doing, and hopefully in that process, learn from you as well. I'm very much looking forward to the exchanges that we will have. So thank you for being here, and let me get going with our first lecture. Fragments of Epic Memory. That was the subtitle of St. Lucian Nobel laureate Derek Walcott's Nobel lecture delivered in Stockholm on December 7th, 1992. The Antilles, Fragments of Epic Memory. As with his poetry, each word Walcott chose for his title was purposefully deployed. Each word opened a portal into understanding the Caribbean that birthed him and his art. Take fragments. It invokes the archaeological, remains protruding from just beneath the Earth's membrane, awaiting discovery, reclamation, and study. Like the islands of the archipelago, these fragments of memory exist separately, but in their ragged edges indicate they were part of something larger, a past that we seldom receive as a whole. And so we create that lost world by joining the pieces with imagination, experience, desire, and need. And how we place them together is how we see what they represent. It is in his explanation of the memory in the title, which Walcott came to far down in the lecture, that the poet expertly captures the disordered state of the archive of remembrance from whence these fragments came. This is what Walcott said, quote, "All of the Antilles, every island, is an effort of memory. Every mind, every racial biography culminating in amnesia and fog," end quote. This is a tremendous line. It accentuates the bleakness of Caribbean memory. It is just as effective for what Walcott leaves unsaid. The reasons for the loss of memories, faded by circumstance and obscured by external design. The conflicting drafts of Caribbean history on which these traces first appear depends on that effort of memory, that struggle to push through the cloud of forgetting and confront the stories untold and the ones that have always been told with the same words and in the same accent. To appreciate this effort reveals an unshakable truth that to tell the histories of these Antillean fragments is to consider, using Walcott's words, quote, "every island, every mind, every racial biography," as episodes in the unsettled confrontation between remembering and renewal of the idea of the Caribbean. The early imperial chroniclers called the archipelago and its inhabitants, quote, "a people without history." The English writer, James Anthony Froude, in the 1880s, surveyed the Caribbean and arrived at a devastating conclusion that, quote, "there has been no saint in the West Indies since Las Casas, no hero unless Filonegro enthusiasm can make one out of Toussaint. There are no people there in the true sense of the word, with a character and purpose of their own, unless to some extent in Cuba, and therefore when the wind has changed and the wealth for which the islands were alone desired is no longer to be made among them, there is nothing to fall back on. Their existence is a struggle to keep afloat, and one by one they go under in the waves," end quote. The British writer, like the Spanish conquistador, the Dutch trader, the American soldier, who gave their own records of the Antilles, denied their audiences the reality of the formation of the Caribbean society that they found so bereft. The people there were descendants of colonial victims who existed in what Jamaican sociologist Orlando Patterson famously termed artificial societies, forged in the European fever dream of profit and exploitation. Their story, they were told, was not theirs. It belonged to the colonizing power and was on loan to them only as long as they remained colonies and bore serviceable value to faraway metropoles. When the condition ceased and their people formed a nation and created their own memories and stories of those memories and myths of those stories, the effort of memory, pushing through the weight of colonial and national projects, became a resistance to the interpretations others held of the Caribbean. Sylvia Wynter, another Jamaican thinker, writing about the formation of the Caribbean personality at the same time Patterson was working on his celebrated Sociology of Slavery in the early 1970s, a period of intense intellectual, political, and cultural rethinking of the history of the Caribbean. In the first draft of her unpublished opus, Black Metamorphosis, gave one of the clearest explanations of how this memory and the myths that are knotted in them tell a story of the entrance of the Caribbean people into history. Here's what Wynter said. "In the mythic fact or factual myth, the Caribbean Negro is a Caribbean native, yet rarely has the fact been questioned. Why? The answer, Winter tells us, is because colonialism created a bigger myth than the ones Caribbean people told themselves, the myth of a cultural void. The truth was that the Caribbean native evolved and indigenized from the captive African had a culture. Time would prove this, and that culture had its own epic memory. For scholars of the Caribbean, our vocation has been defined by the messy excavation of the fragments, shards, and splinters to find the myths and memories at the base of Caribbean societies. The idea of the Caribbean changed over time for Caribbean people, carried by the forceful current of history. Whatever direction that idea took, and however different its interpretations were from island to island and down generations, it had a common source, the ancestral gift of survival. Over the course of the next 3 evenings, it shall be my principal task to share with you, through my reflections on my research and experiences over my career as an explorer of Caribbean myths and memories, how history and time simultaneously polished and obscured that epic memory. Each lecture tells a story of the Caribbean. The 3 stories we will follow are preludes to more celebrated moments in Caribbean history. The roots that lay behind the emergence of the Duvalier dictatorship in Haiti, the construction of memories of freedom and slavery in the 19th century, and the reimagination of the Jamaican past in Jamaica's 1970s. Each of these 3 stories are divided by time, but connected through their composite ideas that together form an opening into how we might understand Caribbean history and themes within it: revolution, time, change, and most of all, freedom, the substrate of Caribbean memory making. If I do my job well, I will take you into these 3 moments in the Caribbean past, moments I have learned, revised, researched, and relearned, as part of an ongoing quest to better understand the place that made me on a personal level and has so critically contributed to the making of the world. The Black metamorphosis that Sylvia Winter so powerfully interrogated was the inevitable transformation of Africans into Caribbean natives. Africans brought to a foreign place were commodities reduced and racialized as value units of unfree labor, made of their horribly unnatural condition a history. And that history came into focus when they resisted, by intellectual activity and revolutionary action, their unfreedom. In the opening chapter of the manuscript of Black Metamorphosis, Winter addresses this burst of the Caribbean into the modern world with a revolt in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, on the screen, that we would come to know as the Haitian Revolution. What the Haitian Revolution created was a profound confrontation between myth and memory and the creation of a new Caribbean narrative, one in which the African became a Caribbean. To make this point, Winter relies on Haitian intellectual and statesman Jean Priestley, who in 1929 wrote about the greatness of what he called, quote, our presence on a spot of that American archipelago that we humanized, and the breach which we made in the process of historical events to snatch our place among men, end quote. Generations of Caribbean thinkers have agreed in many ways with this statement, which imbues the Haitian Revolution and that historical moment of 1791 to 1804 as an origin story of Caribbean memory. Winter, like Derek Walcott, who I quoted at the beginning, came of age intellectual in the 1950s. They were of a generation that was rethinking the Caribbean from the Caribbean. The timing, of course, is important. The 1950s was a period in which Caribbean nationalism was rising and responding to the push of the 1930s, and state sovereignty was on the horizon. Caribbean artists wrestled with themes of race, nation, culture, gender, and identity in their work, and most centrally, history. Winter, in fact, came to her perspective on Price-Mas and the Haitian Revolution through the work of her colleague at the Department of Modern Languages at what was then called University College of the West Indies, not to confuse us with another university college in the mix, the Englishman Gabriel Coulthard, who died suddenly in June 1974, 50 years ago. Coulthard's remarkable 1962 study, Race and Color in Caribbean Literature, probed the development in letters of a Caribbean negritude, whose reflections across the Antilles, had its central light emitted from Priest's pen. Coulthard traveled the region, read in all its languages, and picked up in the prose of the writers the concept of a Caribbean identity, which Winter would expand upon in her work. Received narratives of encounter and empire, sidled uneasily against the newer histories written by C.L.R. James, Aimé Césaire, and others of restless inheritors of slavery's legacies, still yearning to be liberated from imperial assumptions of who they were in the world. Caribbean writers of the 1950s who interrogated that sense of liberation circled often back to this question of Haitian freedom as an origin story. Writing even earlier in 1938 in The Black Jacobins, C.L.R. James, who will be a familiar companion with us on these 3 lectures, famously said, West Indians first became aware of themselves with the Haitian Revolution. This preoccupation with Haitian freedom, at once connecting and disengaging, is a theme that scaffolds a lot of Caribbean memory making. Haitian freedom in 1804 has been an emotional and spiritual site of memory for Caribbean people, as 1492 is for knowledge of the founding of the Atlantic world. In some places, I know it's very disputable. And in so much of the art of the 50s, the touchstone of Haiti is there. It's there in the insertion of Creole in Caribbean verse, in the visual art, in the dance, and in the music and the literature that was produced in that period. The 1950s renewal of interest in Haiti was only partially a result of the forces of creative self-realization of Caribbean identity of the 50s. There was also a tangible knowledge of Haiti, facilitated through the arts and the Republic's culture, which spread. And it spread with the movement of Haitians across the Caribbean in the decade of the 50s. In the 1950s, Haitian dancers and voodoo drummers visited nearby islands in Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, the Bahamas, and even in the Eastern Caribbean, and were celebrated as leaders of an African Caribbean cultural tradition. The relationship between Haiti and its Caribbean neighbors in the 1950s was solidified when in 1954, Haitian President Paul Magua made a state visit to Jamaica that was as important to the people of the era as any visit from the royal family. Years ago, I remember meeting older Jamaicans who remembered being given the day off from school to come and see the Haitian president who was visiting them. It was very significant to have a Black head of state and to have that Black head of state visit Jamaica. A country in which Caribbean freedom and the possibility of an anti-colonial nation existed. That's what many people saw in Haiti. These exchanges of the 50s are little remembered today, as the generation that experienced them has faded. They are even more distant in how we teach and talk of the region because of what followed. The late 50s into the 1960s was a period when nationalism and revolution took the Caribbean headlong into a dramatic 2 decades. The Castro Revolution of 1959, by bringing Cold War battles to the shores of the archipelago, influenced the type of post-colonial structures that would emerge in the 1960s. But the moments before all of that, when Haiti sat as a centerpiece, the basking star of the Caribbean, as a Haitian tourist poster of the era boasted, are significant because they compel us to reflect on how the Caribbean was envisioned at the moment just before the gallop of the 1960s. If the union of Anglophone states in the West Indies Federation of the late 50s process was an attempt to find a commonality on which regional governance can succeed, then Haiti, with its Black general president and towering history, had a place in it. What was the Haiti that so many attached themselves to, and how well did they know it? The Haiti that people like Evan Blake, a Black Jamaican journalist, waxed about in this way in 1953, quote, "In Haiti, color prejudice is unknown. Negroes the world over, victims of every form of schism and prejudice invented by men to keep other men down, have long wondered where in the modern world they may find their race at its best. Visitors to Haiti today know such a place. There they see the Negro at his regal and cultured best, the equal of all men, inferior to none," end quote. That Haiti, so important, so central to Blake's understanding not only of himself, but his own projection as to where he could see Jamaica, his native country, going. That Haiti was an imagined place. There's a land on which the collective memory of Caribbean slavery and its annihilation by war could be projected with beams so radiant that they clouded the source of the heat. I wish then to treat Haiti of 1950 as a historical place that was also going through its own reconstruction of itself. There are two key points I would like to emphasize. First, Haiti's elites were enormously self-aware of the place their country held in the world and sought to make that a part of how they strengthened state control. My second point is that these efforts disguised internal fissures in Haiti, the discordance of my title, which were the source of the ways in which a Haitian nationalism that emerged in the 1930s would begin to falter, and Haiti would ultimately end in dictatorship. Haiti in that period would end in dictatorship. The Haiti of the 1950s, so embraced for its culture, so loved for its example, was a nation still emerging from foreign control. The 19-year United States occupation of Haiti, which lasted from 1915 to 1934, represented a disavowal of the central vision of 1804, Black independence. The occupation was even more a new moment in Haitian history that provoked a reappraisal of the past. The reasons for United States invasion were, as these things often are, in contradistinction of each other. There was a diplomatic instruction that had shown that Haiti had not successfully guarded and protected its democracy, but there was also the way in which the occupation was done to order and to, in some ways, punish Haiti in 1915. There was an unstated anxiety over control of Haiti, a control that brought condescension, manipulation, and punishment on the part of the marine occupiers. Haitian reaction was swift. US repression was quicker. An armed rebel movement in the north that canvassed to the east of Haiti was met with brutality. Haitian 19th century weapons stunned by American 20th century might. The peasantry paid the price, and hundreds of homes, like memories of what existed before marine uniforms and metal, burnt out at the crossroads between past and future in Haiti. But the occupation brought new lessons. The country's critics, some of whom were in the islands that had precedingly clutched onto the idea of Black nationhood, looked on with disappointment at these years. The Haitian experiment, they said, with independence, a proud colonial in Kingston said a year after the American jackboots hit the shores, was over. Haiti would become recolonized. Others believed that US imperialism would bring economic investment, modern development, and an outsized growth in Haiti at the same time that Cuba was going through its sugar boom in the 1920s, leaving the neglected British colonies scrambling for direction. When it became clearer by the mid-1920s, after Senate documents and the Black press in the United States began to investigate and reveal the true nature of the US occupation, people began to realize that the United States, in fact, were oppressing and holding Haiti down. And these same groups waxed about the better values of British colonialism over the crude exploitation of the Americans. Some, in fact, went so far as saying that that Britain should go in and take over Haiti. Very scary thought, but I'll leave that there. When public pressure, the Great Depression, and a balance sheet of more loss than profit caused the Marines to finally withdraw in 1934, Haiti's neighbors joined with the Haitians in calling the désoccupation a second liberation. A 1940 piece in Jamaica's Daily Gleaner gave the following line, quote, "Power-lusting politicians of the past were Haiti's front-rank publicity men. Of course, there have been failures in Haiti. Where wouldn't you find that? But underneath all, there is a genuine desire to give one's best for one's country," end quote. It was really only Haitians who best understood that the entire occupation period was a moment in which the idea of Haitian independence deserved rethinking. What had led to foreign intervention? What, more importantly, had led to the canyon between nation and state that enabled it? Jean Priestley, the thinker I mentioned earlier of the 1920s, best understood the lessons of the occupation years. Price-Mas argued for a reappraisal of the past. A memory of 1804 existed that was preserved in the symbolism of the flag and the heroes Toussaint and Dessalines, but it was a state memory that survived the troubles of the 19th century and came down dented but whole to the 20th century inheritors. It was chiseled in the marble of the statues, taught in schools, printed in the front pages of the dailies Le Nouvelliste and Le Matin on anniversary dates, abbreviated and learned by rote in the anthem. But what was that memory for the Haitians who existed outside the vision of the state? The Haitian peasantry was a majority of Haiti, their land and ways a majority of the country. They had been usable players in the regional conflicts, enchained by the Americans and treated as a Greek chorus by the country's rulers who called them Petit Dessalines, children of Dessalines. Inherent patronizing element in that slogan is noteworthy. Christmas looked at all this and studied it. He reflected crucially on the divisional elements in Haitian society, the way language separates more than unifies. He looked at the geography, the way distance and broken lines of transport made Port-au-Prince its own republic. Price-Mars studied the political history with meticulous attention to the motivations and outcomes of each juncture in Haitian history. The way the excesses and corruption of general presidents had consigned Haiti's majority to remain outside of the political process. More than anything, Price-Mars, the student, the professor, and the ethnologist probed the cultural history of Haiti. It was denied and belittled by his intellectual progenitors, sunken in their Bavarianism. The gulfs that existed in Haiti, he argued, with tremendous perspicacity, could only be narrowed if all Haitians truly saw themselves as Haitian. Why, he asked most poignantly in his book, So Spoke the Uncle, On s'y parle oncle, why did we try to be Frenchmen and forget we were Haitian, end quote. The central argument in so much of Price-Mars' writing, especially in his opus published in 1929, was that national culture, an inexhaustible repository of evidence of Haitian memory, had a place in a modern world. To discredit it, as his intellectual forebears had done, would widen the separation that created foreign intervention. There's a profound argument, introduced at a pivotal time. It made Price-Mars the dean of Haitian thought. The poets, writers, and artists ordered their approach in ways that reflected this new way of thinking of Haiti. Consider Jacques Roumais's profound poem, When the Tom-Tom Beats, published in the early 1940s as a student of Price-Mars. Your heart quivers in the shadow, like a face reflected in turbulent waters. The old mirage resurges from the pit of night. Do you not feel the sweet magic of the past? Roumain was part of the indigenous school of writers who drew on Price-Mars' lead in developing their own aesthetic, one that centered Haitian culture and placed it above French culture. By the 1940s, the insistence of Haitian culture as a part of Haitian history and present had entered the national mainstream. Haiti's post-occupation rulers promoted Haitian voodoo, repackaged as folklore, as an element of attraction to the foreign tourist. Voodoo for Price-Mars was to come out of the shade of the mapu tree and be celebrated as Haitian as the rum, as Haitian as the carnival. To state leaders, it was curated dance, primitive art, and popular music. By the 1950s, voodoo motifs became symbolically represented in so much of how Haiti projected itself. But it was more than that. It was tied to a new representation of the memory of 1804. It was commercialized, yes. It advertised rather than explained Haiti when projected by the state. It fed foreign imagination, but it represented a shift in approach, a new way of seeing Haitian history, 1804, and especially Haitian culture, as plaited together. When the well-traveled Price-Mars spoke of Haiti, he was listened to by his regional colleagues who took from his lessons inspiration on how they regarded Haiti and Caribbean history in their own work. This intellectual and cultural production of the era, intellectual and cultural production of the era, carried one of the ideas of Haiti emergent after the occupation, but not isolated. The late 40s made Haitians aware of that. The colossal effort of memory, again coming to Walcott's words of the Haitian past, by itself could not bridge all the spaces created in the century and a half since 1804. Some merged it with a new nationalism. Intellectuals like Dantes Bellegarde advocated an outlook that centered a rationalization of culture and history with an elite perspective of control. Then there were the Marxists, people like Jacques Roumain, the poet who became a Marxist, and Max Roudicourt, who claimed that nationalism was bourgeois and reinforced class prejudices that abraded the union anti-occupation created. And then Very much at the center of a lot of the intellectual debates on Haitian nationalism that emerged after the occupation were the Noiristes, a group of Black middle-class professional Haitians who saw the new nationalism and reading of the Haitian past in terms of color conflict. The light-skinned leaders had damaged Haitian freedom by treating their dark-skinned kin with the disdain the French had. Just as had been done before, they felt this was being repeated by the intellectuals and the bourgeoisie of their generation. Very much at the center of a lot of this writing was Francois Duvalier, then an ethnology student, and his writing partner, Lorimer Denis. The real revolution of Haiti, they argued, started with Priestley. He was their teacher at Lycée Pétion, the most famous high school in Port-au-Prince. He was the exemplar of Haitian thought, and he taught Haitians to love themselves, all of themselves. But it was necessary for this project to go further, they argued. The real transformation was to have people like them, representatives of Haiti's Black middle class, ascending in the professional sectors after the occupation, ruling the state. It is easy to see how these political ideas, which spawned from the cultural ideas, could land on fertile soil. Haiti was independent for so long, but with recent foreign control. How could the errors that led to the surrenders of 1915 be avoided? Was it not the duty of those who knew the country well? Priestley, the methodical ethnographer, the country doctor Duvalier, and those who had worked with the peasantry, practiced their worship, spoke their Creole, understood their stories. Was it not their responsibility to issue a new rule for Haiti? This was an innovating idea that comes at a very profound period of Haitian nationalism. Duvalier and Denis, in their book, The Problem of Class in the Course of Haitian History, related color to class. They became symbiotic, almost one in their analysis. It had been the source of what they call the ruin of Haiti. And the 1940s to the 1950s would be the best time to transform that, because there had now been an awakening. It is essential to state that as much as they celebrated Priestley as a sort of father of their own thought, he disavowed them, and he would be very explicit about this later on. He consistently maintained that his was an idea of cultural, not political, nationalism and domination, and they were not the same. He understood Haiti far too well to know the risks that of the divisions that could emerge from the program that Duvalier and others were writing about. But even Priestley could not completely appreciate what would come of this idea once it grew. In 1946, the overthrow of President Lescaut was an opening that let political Noirism creep like an untended vine into Haitian national life. The fasting of ideology with emotion in the subsequent election campaign, which promised to institute democracy in Haiti, were corrupted by personal politics and misinterpretations of the ideas that had been birthed in the 30s. And so when Estimé, the president, became the person in charge in August 1946, a person from a peasant background and not of the elite, it was seen as a triumph of the moderate Noiristes, those who wanted power based on color and claim, but did not want it redistributed to the villages that even many of them rose from. Estimé took his mandate sincerely. He was a man of history, imbued with all the hope and promise of his valiant ancestors who raised their swords against racial colonialism. He brought change. There was a minimum wage rate that was increased. A labor ministry had been set up for the first time to administer the concerns of urban workers in the capital. There was a celebration of Haitian folklore in the gorgeous bicentenary exhibition of 1949 to 50. And there was a revolution in the appearance of ministers and cabinet representatives. For these advancements, he was punished. It was too much too soon, and it challenged an order that the Marines had ensured. He faced competition from every quarter, save for his loyalists in the streets and the cabinet. Men like Duvalier, who was a loyalist to Estimé, who served in the Ministry of Labor. Estimé's short 4-year rule shuddered because of the failure of the ideas birthed from the transformation to address political hubris. He suffered as his predecessors, regardless of color, had done, from an ache to hold on to power as long as possible. And when his maneuvers precipitated a crisis in 1950, he was overthrown and exiled. The ideas that brought Estimé to power could not leave with him. The shift had penetrated too deeply, and now Haitian rule and politics had come at a time when the wider Caribbean expected that the Republic would be a beacon of Black leadership in an age of nascent decolonization. There was no possibility for a member of the light-skinned elite to replace him. It was then that Paul Magloire, who I mentioned earlier, the general president who was regaled as a monarch when he visited Kingston in 1954, it was then that he came to dominate 1950s Haiti. Now, decades ago, when I was conducting oral histories on this period in Haitian history in Port-au-Prince, among surviving exiles in the United States, I met a man in Haiti who told me the story of Estimé's 1950 overthrow. He told me that the evening before the coup, Paul Magloire, then a colonel in the Haitian army, was sitting on his veranda playing cards and drinking rum. As the night stretched on, the host tried to inveigle the good colonel to another hand and to refresh his glass. Magloire politely said no. He needed to go home and get some rest because in a few hours he would be taking over the government. Everyone laughed. Magloire smiled. By the time they sat in their offices for the afternoon coffee the next day, they heard on the radio that Estimé had been removed from the palace and Haiti was now ruled by a military junta with Paul Magloire at the lead. There's a lot in this story. What is most striking of all was the nonchalance with which Magloire announced his actions to his friends. So assured was he that the coup would succeed, that Estimé had no more support in the streets or halls of parliament, that he could be certain that Estimé would sign his letter of resignation, which had been prepared in advance. There's also the point that Magloire was certain that his leadership in the coup would prevail. Magloire fitted the profile that the Norris demanded of Haitian leaders. He was from the north, not Port-au-Prince. He was dark-skinned and popular. He did not share their views. He was no radical. But Magloire certainly saw himself as the corrector of the misdeeds of Haiti's past rulers in some ways. But the story that I just told you also illustrates something even more insightful into how Haiti of the 1950s would operate. In reality, Magloire had desired the presidency even before Estimé. When the events of 1946 occurred, he was too junior to make something of it. So he spent the time building his alliances. He later manipulated his assets and added to them a familiarity with the main power brokers in Haiti, the US diplomats, the military officers above, and the military officers above him and the rank and file below him, the Catholic Church and the economic elite, which he could turn to good measure for political purpose. Most of all, Magloire was willing to wait for his chance. He knew it would come. He watched Estimé closely, and he kept tabs on the more radical Norris like Duvalier, and he waited. And there were other men, many other men, who also watched and waited for their chance, but did not have the access to power that he did. So when Paul Magloire's chance arrived, he could put down his deck of cards and put on his hat and walk into history. One of the first things Magloire did when he came into office was to silence all his opposition. Estimé relied on Magloire in the 40s, but Magloire relied on no one. He was chief leader of the army, saw to it he would be promoted to general, and now had the palace. He buttressed his domestic support with outside alliance. Magloire was warm with Trujillo in the Dominican Republic. He made spectacular visits overseas, as I mentioned, to Jamaica, but also a very well-publicized trip right here to Canada. He did all of this with a famed gregariousness that his rivals lacked. Magloire drank rum and danced on the weekends. He made gestures of his rural trips, waving and distributing largesse with a smile. All of this he did with a terrific self-awareness. Industrialists adored him. They made more money under him than ever before. Hotels sprang up around Haiti, and tourists came not just for the manicured voodoo ceremonies under the thatched roof of Caban Shukun, but also the sense of sunshine and security under the big man's rule. CBS, the NAACP, WLIM, Pan Am, Hollywood, they're all regular reporters and traversers to Port-au-Prince in the 1950s, celebrating the wonders of Paul Magloire, who would become the first, and I believe still only Haitian president to grace the cover of Time magazine. What they basked in was not dissimilar to what Caribbean people found in Haiti of the 1950s. It was proud and dynamic, but it existed under tighter rule than outsiders realized. During the Magloire years, Duvalier was hiding underground. The Marxists were disbanded, run down, and crushed by the weight of military rule. There would be no space for radical ideas in Magloire's Haiti. What no one who waxed about the greatness of Haiti in the 1950s or those who believed the government's gifts were unending knew was that the ideas that Price-Mars birthed and which were taken into new directions by the Noiristes contained much more than a celebration of Haitianness. They were beliefs on which the generation after 1946 came to understand Haiti. There were other leaders, and they had taken that root idea into other directions. They hid while Magloire had promenades, knowing that his rule could not hold. History taught them that. None was more popular and more astute to the street-level clamor for change than Daniel Fignoli, a man who is still little understood as central to Haitian political history, especially in this period. Fignoli's career paralleled that of Duvalier and even Magloire, but it was ignited by something they did not possess: magnetism. Daniel Fignoli was a popular leader of the urban poor, the domestics and the wharf workers, the street sweepers and underemployed thousands who poured into Port-au-Prince in the 50s in search of opportunity. Fignoli spoke to them in their language, an eloquent Creole delivered in fire and symbolism. He screeched, he spoke fast, he modulated his voice suddenly so that the weight of each syllable was felt by a spellbound audience. More than all that, Fignoli translated the Noirism of the 40s, the ideas that Magloire's enemies squeezed tightly into their palms while hiding from his soldiers, into the language of the streets. He wrote about them in expositions, in his journalism, in his books, and he spoke about them on the radio until Magloire forced him off the air and into the background. Men like Fignoli, Duvalier, Duny, and military men like Antonio Cabral and others who wanted the power that Magloire had and were prepared to marshal all their forces to get it when the moment presented itself, when their chance came, those men came to dominate Haiti in the mid-1950s. And in 1956, that moment arrived. The devastation of Hurricane Hazel in October 1954 exposed the corruption with Magloire's rule. Magloire had silenced but not eliminated his enemies. They lay in wait. To move Haiti further into the 20th century, under Magloire, universal suffrage was passed. Elections, previously a battle of rival elites on horseback, then a battle behind closed doors of the parliament, were now open for all. So the stakes were greater than ever before. The awareness of Haiti was also greater, not just in the Caribbean, but across the world. From the Canadian economic interest in Haitian industry to African Americans in the early steps of the civil rights movement who championed a pan-African response to racial violence, and the leftists across Latin America who desired to expand their links, Haiti often came up in their conversations. It figured, in short, in multiple programs. Magloire's constitutional tenure was to end in 1956. His allies said he needed more time. He had only just started to build the country, they said, after 6 years. Even Evan Blake, the journalist in Jamaica I mentioned earlier, became a strong supporter of Magloire. He said this in 1956, quote, "Having won the love and affection of his people, Papa Magloire aims to keep it. Despite the political chicanery of previous regimes, Haiti has remained a democracy while her neighbors have degenerated into dictatorships," end quote. He was justifying the remaining in power of Magloire. But the trouble was that to keep that affection, Magloire had to resort to dictatorship. For all his skills at reading politics as he read a card game, Magloire knew that his success was only guaranteed if he had elite support. That support began to pull away from him in 1956. His actions were erratic. He was skidding into authoritarianism. The nation wanted an election and he did not want to leave. Magloire, the self-proclaimed architect of a modern Haiti, ended his rule ignobly when the pattern he established to get rid of Lescaut and Estimé was followed faithfully by those he trained. By 1956, Magloire, once praised, now pilloried, was an exile in Kingston, and Haiti was cannoning toward confrontation. Now, the electoral campaign of 1957, which brought a lot of this imagination of Haiti in the 50s to a devastating conclusion, was profound in many ways. But it was meant to be the opposite. Rosemary Evans, a Jamaican correspondent sent to cover Haiti in January of 1957, a month after Maguire's exile, accurately read the scene and reflected the possibilities in the article she filed. Quote, democracy has come bounding into the open in that this April Haitians will vote, not only for senators, but also for the first time directly for a president. For the first time in April also, Haitian women will vote. This was real progress, end quote. But beneath it, she wrote, there was unpredictability. The proud progenitor of Caribbean freedom was also, according to Evans, quote, an adventurous, unpredictable problem child. Evans and 30 other journalists from around the world attended the press conferences in Port-au-Prince, where there was discussion of how the elections would be organized. They heard from the leading candidates and judged them. They sensed, like the dusty sweat of downtown crawling at the back of their limbs, that tension and hatred over color, competing visions of the future, and desperation for power were more important in the battle than upholding the heritage of Haitian freedom. All the surface imagery and projection of Caribbean hopes and dreams were blurred when the four leading candidates, Clément Jumel, François Duvalier, Louis Desjoie, and Daniel Fignolet, rallied their troops into verbal and political joust that got increasingly more violent. By the early summer, there had been shootings and bombings, disruptions in the market trade, terror, and orchestrated urban violence. Each candidate unleashed more venom against the other, and each candidate promised more to the Haitians and proclaimed himself the man of destiny. If the streets could decide the victor, they would have been Daniel Fignolet. He organized the largest marches and moved his audiences with blistering attacks on the elite and wild pledges that the poor would live in large houses with indoor plumbing if he became president. The other candidates could not bear it. They knew that the only possible way for them to defeat Fignolet was to remove him. So they engineered a plan. Offer him the provisional presidency. That would satisfy his vanity, corner him in the palace, and then put him on the path to exile. Fignolet accepted, believing that he could not be removed though the Constitution forbade provisional presidents from running for office. The Republic of Haiti, he said, when he was provisional president in March 1957, will have a true democratic government. There will be no dictatorship. Now, here is video footage of the moment Daniel Fignolet became president. And I chose to include this in my presentation because I think it gives you a very powerful visual image of not only his popularity, but the extent to which the Haitian population, especially in Port-au-Prince, were deeply politicized around events in this period. And this is all just before the Duvalier dictatorship. As is customary, when a Haitian president is proclaimed, they have to go to the cathedral for official ceremony. Fignolet couldn't even get in the cathedral because the crowd was so thick. He had to be escorted out. And he was taken from there, and this is just outside the offices of his campaign headquarters. He was a labor leader as well. So this is where his labor union was headquartered, and was taken to the palace, which is where he made the address I just read. Now, what's very significant about this footage as well is that you see the large working class support for Fignolet. Duvalier did not command a support that was equal in number to Fignolet, though he did have a large support. This was a threat to the power brokers in Haiti at the time. There's Fignolet ascending the steps, being congratulated. It was also significant because Fignolet was in his 40s at the time, and there was a fear earlier on that he could have won the election in 1950. So there had been a constitutional change to increase the age of the president to block him. But he had finally come into power in 1957. And of course, there you see a sort of carnivalesque celebration just outside the palace when the people's leader had become president. Now, what's somewhat chilling and indeed deeply tragic is what would follow all of what we're seeing on the screen. Because Daniel Fignole would only remain in power for just a little over 2 weeks. He would be overthrown by the military, who hatched a plan to get rid of him. And many of his supporters were repressively forced by the army to remain silent. Once that happened, it was a clear path for Duvalier to push forward in the election. Election day occurred on September 22nd, 1957, and Duvalier, running virtually unopposed, with his remaining rivals having been pushed underground, became the president of Haiti. The country was scarred. The Duvalier years would be brutal and vicious, and thousands of Haitians would leave for Canada and the United States and other places, while thousands would be killed by Duvalier's Macoutes. Haiti's neighbors, who had called themselves one with the Black nation, began to distance themselves with striking immediacy after Duvalier became president. Even before Election Day in Jamaica, there were loud warnings. One writer said this, quote, "Haiti is 100 miles away. Please let her domestic quarrels remain within her gates." Another writer by the name of Lloyd Alexis said this in June 1957, quote, "I am a Grenadian. The political chaos of Haiti comes at a time when the West Indies is seeking self-determination and independence, and is very disquieting indeed." The question as to what Haitian disorder could mean for the rest of the Caribbean, marching lockstep toward independence, led to a rupture in the relationship between Haiti and its neighbors. The violent last days of the campaign left few rooting for Duvalier when he took the oath of office. The end of the 50s Caribbean dream was made clear by the early 1960s, when Haiti became associated with terrorism and dictatorship. Then in 1964, when Duvalier proclaimed himself Président à vie, a bridge collapsed. In the radical discourse of Caribbean left intellectuals of the 60s, there was no space for recognition of the symbols, myths, and memories of Haiti and the origin story of 1804, which was now seen as being sullied by Duvalier. In 1968, a pivotal year in global activism, and especially in the rise of the left in the Caribbean, a final examination paper for a course on Caribbean history in the history department at the University of the West Indies Mona campus included the following optional questions for students to answer, quote, "Account for the retardation of Haiti," end quote. The story of Caribbean freedom was being remounted, and the margins of Haiti's epic memory was covered by the frame. The Haitian Revolution was for everywhere, but Haiti first. And so its memory belongs most to the Haitians who worked through the chaos of their history that was to follow and kept that memory intact as the most valuable legacy for their descendants. We might therefore consider the discordance of the 1950s not as an anomaly, but possibility. The potential for that memory to have created a new connection between Haiti and its neighbors, then clamoring for self-government, defining their regional identity, and in their art, sketching what it meant to be West Indian. A coda. On January 1st, 1954, Paul Magloire, then still very much the man in charge, inaugurated the celebrations of the 150th anniversary of Haitian independence. The Centenaire, as it was called, was a showcase of how far the Republic had come, how many hurdles it had cleared to get to a point when the modern Black world could still look up at Christophe's citadel and share in the pride of its making. In Gonaïves, the city of independence, Magloire raised himself to the dais and made the following address. This is Magloire now. "It is now 150 years ago that right here in Gonaïves, our ancestors added an epic page to the history of humanity. These thousands of slaves who had just broken their chains had entrusted to the assembled generals the task of materializing in the act of the independence of the new state the aspirations of all the oppressed who over the centuries had revolted in vain. Also, the remarkable figure of Jean-Jacques Dessalines painted on this day the gigantic proportions of the tree of general freedom of slaves whose long-lived and deep roots cannot henceforth be uprooted. This son of Arada, who like Toussaint Louverture, carried within him the nostalgia for the splendor and grandeur of the kingdom of Dahomey, gathered around his prestigious black and light-skinned persons from the colony of Saint-Domingue. It was necessary to spring forth at the same time in the hearts of the men of the New World, this spark, generating the flame of freedom and independence, which would embrace all America, not just Haiti, all America, end quote. That story of how Haiti fulfilled the aspirations of America was repeated across the Caribbean that year. It was told on the radio in Jamaica the following month in a 30-minute radio documentary on the Haitian Revolution led by a young Guyanese historian named Elsa Gavaya and 3 young playwrights just out of university to themselves and dramatists who were on the eve of legendary careers, who were Slade Hopkinson from Guyana, James Lee Watt from Trinidad and Tobago, and Derek Walcott from St. Lucia. It traveled beside the other Haiti that people talked about then and now. The Haiti where the other memories, the memories of 1946 and 1957 and 1964 are forgotten for survival. Un pays sans mémoire is how Haitians refer to their country quite often. And they have to forget those years so that the epic memory of their founding can live. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful lecture. To think through those years in Haiti, which really come alive in the pages of Red and Black in Haiti. I want to open it up to the audience. I know we only have 25 minutes. But I wanted to ask you, as you think about, like when you started by looking at figures like Sylvia Wynter and that moment, that other moment in the late 1960s, I think of the year that Jean Priestley passed away in 1969, and also it was the same year that Fernando Ortiz also passed away. And just wondering, like thinking about that other moment, is there in terms of echoes of these sort of relationships with Haiti? I just wondered if you might reflect a bit about this history that you're talking about, and how then Haiti gets taken up, and some of these ideas of Jean Price-Mars get taken up in this later period.
Yes, it's a very good question. I think a lot of it has to do with Price-Mars' later career as well, because one of the things I didn't emphasize is he was a statesman. He was a representative of Haiti in several different fora, officially as a member of state, but also as an intellectual. And that was really important. And that allowed for the ideas of Price-Mars to sort of travel with him. And they are indeed, yes, taken up very strongly by a lot of people who are following sorts of these questions of where is the root of an idea of a creation of a culture that you sort of celebrate and hold, sort of emerge from. And a lot of that's really sort of what I think Price-Mars is very central to doing. The other thing that's important too is that there is a generation that was sort of influenced by Price-Mars who are also coming into their own renown at that very same point, that same period you mentioned. Melanie, so René Depeste is very, very prominent during that period. Jacques-Stéphane Alexis as well. These are poets and writers, but also activists and revolutionaries in their own right, who are after, some of them before Duvalier, but all of them pretty much from the Duvalier period on, are living in other parts of the world. Cuba, in the Caribbean, that's where Depeste lived for a while. Some of them going as far as to Africa, in French Africa. And as they're moving and as their art is developing and reaching new audiences, the tracing of the roots of a lot of that sort of artistic identity leads a lot of people to Price-Mars's work. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I want to make sure we have time for the audience. Questions? We have a question here from,
Thank you. Oh my gosh. I don't like talking with mics. Anyway, sorry. Thank you so much for your lecture. And I have so many questions, but I'll just ask one. So much of, again, what Professor Newton, and I kind of just want to jump off the question that you just answered. So much of what you were talking about, and of course it's so important, is the influence of Haiti abroad, not just in the Caribbean, but of course, as you just said, in the United States and Canada, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm curious as to, obviously, the importance of Haitian influence outside, but I'm curious as to if there's outside influence during this period coming inwards into Haiti in terms of politics, or I remember you mentioned just that second turn of government, he's talking to American diplomats, and of course, it makes sense that the Americans have their hands in this to a certain extent. So I'm curious again, is there outside influence coming in politics or culture, and if so, what is it? Or if not, why do you think it's the case?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think it's a question you could ask of many other periods in Haitian history beyond the one I covered tonight. There had long been a narrative that Haiti was always sort of so anomalous, it was isolated. But in reality, Haiti has always been connected. I mean, one of the things we must accept when we stress Haiti as so fundamental to the development of ideas of the Caribbean and how we see the regional networks in the Caribbean, then we have to also accept that people move, ideas move, histories move across those same networks. So Haiti is very present. So where those influences do enter Haiti are very much sort of on that sort of big level that you highlighted with the United States and its influence in Haiti, but also very strongly Latin America. Haiti was very deeply connected to its Latin American neighbors. Dominican Republic is right beside Haiti, whether through national currents, whether it's at president to president, state to state, but also through radical movements, the various radical groups in the DR who were, organized, were similarly connected to groups in Haiti, but definitely Cuba was a major, major connection. Then you have labor migration as well, the trans-circulation of Haitians who are moving all across the region at this time. So Haiti definitely was very, very firmly connected to a lot of these outside currents. Now, how they shaped what's happening in Haiti would be very difficult, obviously, to generalize. You'd have to sort of look at various responses to what's happening. And one of the great ways I found in approaching that is to actually look at the literature that was coming out to Haiti at the time, the stylistic elements of it that borrowed from other literary traditions, the way in which that emphasis on a culture of reading, a culture of, particularly, I'm speaking obviously here of a sort of elite, but the way in which that becomes celebrated as important in the way in which, in the shaping of these ideological developments in Haiti. Yeah.
thank you so much. It's Professor Lisa Trotz.
Thank you, Matthew. That was really beautiful and really deeply moving. And I guess, it's moving because you sort of, just hearing you speak about this deep ambivalence that the Anglophone Caribbean has had with Haiti, this sort of entanglement, but this also disavowal. And so my question is just in relation, I'm just thinking of Derek Walcott's Drums and Colors, the play he wrote for West Indian Federation, where it's kind of both a warning, but also it does engage the Haitian Revolution. And I'm just wondering, because you have also done this film on Rodney in the 1960s, and I'm just wondering if, you could reflect perhaps on the extent to which I hadn't even weirdly thought about it before until I heard you speak today, about whether this period of the Noiristes, for example, which seems in a sense to sort of even anticipate in some ways the emergence of these kinds of conversations that Rodney starts engaging in the 1960s and where he is talking about race and color and class. Is there any, I mean, we can read a relation, but I'm also wondering if there's any relation in his own practice, in his own engagements in which that comes through. Because as I was hearing you and thinking about it, it isn't explicit.
No, it's very, very good question. And I have asked myself that same question many times, having worked a lot on Walter Rodney's life and career for a film I made on him, and looking very closely at a lot of Rodney's writings during that period. And what I often find is a loud silence. It's important to say that because Rodney was very close to C.L.R. James, who wrote on the Haitian Revolution. Rodney himself wrote about revolutions, but looking at the Russian Revolution a lot more than the Haitian Revolution in his writings. And it could be, and this is a speculation, that the way in which Haiti was perceived in the 60s when Rodney's coming of age, as identified with Duvalier, who used Black power as the sort of symbol of his government. He said he was a Black power government. So there's a way in which that could become so, terribly redounding on the movement that Rodney was and others were involved in at the time. It's still a question. Just last month, that question had a clue that came to me, which I had never known before. I learned from Pat Rodney, this is Walter Rodney's wife, that he actually visited Haiti at one point in time in the 1970s. So I found that really, now that's opened a whole new set of inquiries for me, because it's, as you said, it's not in, he didn't write about it. It's not there in his writing, but he clearly was inspired enough to visit Haiti. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Professor.
Thank you.
I'd like to expand on the first question and ask a question in two parts.
Okay.
The first questioner asked you to comment on influences from outside Haiti. First part then is, what evidence is there of continuing US influence on the political situation in Haiti after they removed the Marines? So covert political influence,
Yeah.
not the explicit military influence. And the second, I suggest you might be even more important. You touched on the varying extents of support that the different leaders had from the local elites.
Yeah.
But I wonder how much of an effect the lingering effects of the reparations that Haiti was made to pay to France had on stunting the development of the common people, not so much the elites, who were affected to a much lesser extent.
Yes, thank you very much. Two very important questions. I'll take them in the order you pose them. Thanks. The United States influence in Haiti after the occupation remained very strong. They were not Marines on the ground, but United States diplomacy and influence on Haitian political direction was very strong. In short, all the way up to and including Duvalier, no Haitian president or aspirant for the presidency could make it to that office without US support. Duvalier understood this, and Duvalier found a way tactically and strategically to get that support. It wasn't guaranteed for him at the beginning of the campaign, and Duvalier astutely forged alliances with various other groups first, and those alliances allowed him to eliminate his opposition. So then the United States had no choice but to choose or back Duvalier, as long as Duvalier had the army, which he did. And then he betrayed them, but that's another story. So the United States influence is constant straight throughout all of this. And it would become an element that would enable Duvalier's long dictatorship, because during the post-Cuban Revolution, Duvalier would promise that Haiti would remain non-communist in return for US support. The second question about the Haitian indemnity, as you quite rightly pointed out, which was the money that Haiti paid to France in 1825. Well, it was signed in 1825 for French recognition of the independent Haitian state. And that money would be serviced regularly, was renegotiated many times throughout the 19th century, but it was also faithfully met by various Haitian leaders in the 19th century until it was completed. That definitely had a major impact on, there's no question, on the ability for Haiti to develop and to provide social services, infrastructure, programs, education, all of those things, because it meant that a significant portion of the national budget of Haiti had to be devoted to the servicing of this debt to France. Now, what's important is to put other things on top of that so we understand the complexity. It's not only the indemnity that they had to pay for, they also had to pay debts that were incurred to service the indemnity. There was also two other factors that are often overlooked. One of the great paranoid fears of many a Haitian ruler after 1804, in fact most, was reinvasion and reconquering of Haiti. So it meant that they had to keep up an army in some form or shape. And this wasn't an army in the way we'd understand the institution of the army, which would emerge during the US occupation, but it was some form of national security, in quotes. And that was also a big drain on the national finance. And we cannot discount the levels of corruption at various parts of the state. We just can't, eliminate that. So there's this real sort of knotted economic consequence of what's happening in Haiti after independence that, quite rightly, as often happens, the majority people pay the largest price for that.
Thank you so much. So I think we have a question from folks online.
Yeah, another question from one of our viewers, thinking about the connections between Haiti and the US, maybe more in a contemporary view. Our viewer writes, "Thank you so much for this enlightening lecture. There is a huge interest in Haitian studies in the USA. MIT has apparently set aside $187 million for Haitian studies. If that is true, this smacks of spycraft. Your thoughts?"
It's a very good question. Let me just first with a quick response that I sort of smiled when I heard the question. Professor Newton already gave away our age quietly in her introduction of me.
Big year for the 74 club.
It's a big year, yeah. But it's funny because when I started when I was a graduate student in the 1990s working on Haiti, there were very, very few people I met who knew about Haiti, let alone wanted to research Haiti. And I studied in the US, and that carried on for a long time. I'm very delighted and heartened to see that there is this great interest, and the person online who posed the question highlighted that. And that's a good thing at the level of scholarly interest. Seeing more research being done on Haiti, to me, is always a good thing. The extent to which, though, that you have some of this being done for reasons that are not noble, if you would like to put it that way. I would say actually predates what we even see happening now. The United States coverage, or even, to use a more accurate word, surveillance of a lot of what happens in Haiti goes far, far back. And that's always been a present element to it. It is motivated at various points in time by for different reasons. There has, as many of us probably know, been a historical concern and worry about Haitian migration to the United States, which has produced or exposed some very horrific and frankly, racist commentary from people who should know better from the United States regarding Haiti and Haitians. And that too has a long history. What that is going to look like in the next decade or more is a very interesting question to look at. I do tend to be a bit pessimistic. I don't know if it comes with age, but I mean, both places in that relationship are entering or are in very unusual territory in terms of their politics and their national life. I'm very focused, of course, on what's happening in Haiti at the moment, which is very difficult and very upsetting. And it exposes again how the disconnect that I tried to trace in my lecture this evening has had its own long-term consequences, and particularly this disconnect of the Caribbean or within the Caribbean regarding Haiti, because it's a very, very hard moment for Haiti at present.
And just before we move on, $187 million, is that real? The MIT?
Oh, sorry, I didn't pick up on that. I don't know, quite frankly. I don't know.
Right. Okay. So we do have space for 3 more questions. I might ask one as people think, just give you a little space to think about your questions. I have many questions, but again, thinking about the political moment that we're in, and over the years of teaching, Haitian history, and now looking at, a certain person to the south of us who's about to reattain the once and future president of the United States. I've often thought, that one of the misfortunes of, I guess, the sort of racism of some of like the lack of understanding, let's put it that way, of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, I would say, the island of Hispaniola and its history, but Haiti in particular in this case, is the unwillingness to recognize that there may be models and warnings and, things to be learned from this history for countries that are more powerful. And I just wanted to ask you, when I look at, the once and future president, I have often thought of figures like Paul Magloire and Duvalier as, terrifyingly prescient figures who it would behoove more people to understand how they came to power. To understand that, they came to power by subverting constitutional processes and so on, but they did come to power with popular support, right? And I just wondered what you thought of that in terms of what can we learn in our current political moment from this historical moment that you're describing?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot you can learn. I naturally go back to Haiti first before thinking of other places on this. And I think that what's most valuable is seeing how the real effort to create a democratic institutional structure and process in Haiti fell apart in 1957, because there was a real, I mean, as I mentioned in my lecture, it was universal suffrage. Women had the vote, Haitian women. People were going to polls for the first time. And really what was, sort of the deeper underlying battle that was being waged at that same time was one of the past, of how power was taken, really, in Haiti before, versus a present in the 1950s of how power should be earned by the ballot. And the failure for that to actually materialize in something that was lasting, that would eventually lead to the dictatorship of Duvalier, and then as François Duvalier and then his son, Jean-Claude Duvalier, still has repercussions in Haiti today. And this is why that whole memory of it to me is so crucial. The lessons that we can take from it now is, as Haiti looks towards, yet again, a new process of building democracy. What is it about why that didn't work then that we can take from now? And also, very importantly, and coming to, as you mentioned, to paraphrase you, the leader down south of where we are, that also is exposed in many ways the fragility of democracy, even in the place that has said it's going to spread democracy, especially to Haiti. It's been responsible for the various missions to create a democratic Haiti, that even in that space, you see the fragility and strains on that democracy. There's so much you can take from it. One of the things, though, that I often fall back on is, why is it that those lessons are not learned and taught? Why is it that those memories don't exist in the narrative of the nation today? And that's something I struggle to answer in my work and my writing. But I have to accept it's an ongoing process, because it's to understand that, because in some senses it's about the two things I often come back to. One is the need to let go of these difficult memories, to move on. And the other one is the consequence of decades and generations of fragmentation of the nation through migration, through dictatorship, through political turmoil, and so on, that fragments the sense of what the national memory is. And what we get are these sorts of particles of it. And one of the humble things we as historians have to realize is that we're always just looking at a piece, not the whole.
Thank you so much. And Red. Yeah. Professor Mullings.
Thank you. I really, really enjoyed your talk, learned a lot from it. What I have is really a question just for clarification, because as you were speaking about Fignolet, made me think a lot about Aristide. And I was just curious whether I could make that parallel or should make that parallel, because it would say something about also the popular, embrace of particular leaders, why it didn't work in Haiti, and what that might mean for the rest of the region. But I don't know if I should make that kind of parallel.
It's a very good parallel, and I'll tell you, I've made that parallel myself many times, actually. And I had the opportunity to meet Aristide a few times. And once I asked him what he thought of Fignolet, I was very surprised. Well, should I have? I was surprised at the time, but in retrospect, I shouldn't have been, that he praised René Préval. But Aristide was a politician, so he's being partisan in that. But yeah, there are very strong parallels between Fignolet and Aristide, but also lots of departures too. One of the things was that the Haiti changes over time, right? So Fignolet's great strength was in Port-au-Prince and the areas around it. The communication networks to the other provinces in the 50s were not as they would be in the 90s, when Aristide could build the Lavalas movement the way he did. So Aristide definitely had a much wider national reach. The other thing as well is that there are other gatekeepers to power in the provinces. that Fignoli was difficult to navigate. But his focus on Port-au-Prince made all the sense because that's where power was centralized. So and what I'm really fascinated with ultimately is this question about power and how it functions in Haiti, and how that ties into memory too, which is really interesting. I have interviewed Maguiristes in my research. I've interviewed Duvalierists in my research, and it's amazing. Their narratives of the exact same period are completely shaped differently because of this. That has something to say not only about memory making, the sorts of lines for power are sort of sketched and designed in Haiti, because then it's who knows who and all of those circuits. But yeah, I think there's a larger question about whether or not you could have a populist charismatic, to use that much used word, emerge in Haiti now again. I don't know. It seems that again the gatekeepers to power access are way more numerous now than they had been before. And we're now dealing with a complication that did not exist in Aristide or Fignoli's time, which is gangs and the sort of atomization of power at these very smaller levels, which makes it very, very difficult for any one populist, powerful, charismatic figure to emerge who can thread all of that together. It's very difficult to see it now. And again, the thing with Fignoli is that Fignoli's fundamental idea, and this is very different, again, another great difference, I think, was he was working off of his own interpretation of the cultural Noirism and the political ideas of his era. He wrote extensively about that. So that's different, I think, from Aristide. Aristide, brilliant man, but I don't think he was operating on the same level of a kind of ideological hold to something.
You have time for one more question? Oh, yes? Is there another question? Okay, do we have anyone online? No? Okay, there is a question. Okay. Oh, sorry, if you could wait for the mic, thanks.
Given that Santo Domingo is not the Norway of the Caribbean, I'm wondering why it didn't rub off a little bit to the Haitians.
Yeah.
I know that it's not the best, but
Yes. I think it's because they had very different national history evolutions, especially after the independence in the Dominican Republic, after the ending of the Haitian occupation of the DR. They went in different directions in that regard. It doesn't mean that they're not interconnections. There are, oh yeah, definitely, and they're very deep. But if I interpret your question correctly, it's whether you're asking why the systems in the DR never influenced those in Haiti. I mean, you had similar I mean, Trujillo was a dictator, and in many ways, Trujillo, out dictated Duvalier. I just think that they evolved as two different countries. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay. So I really want to thank everyone and thank you for the generosity of your answers. And so now we will hear from Professor Tagliamonte.
So this concludes our lecture for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining with your thoughtful questions. I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you about upcoming public lectures at University College. So on November 21st, we will have the W.J. Alexander Lecture in English, and we will have Professor Warren Cariou from the Department of English, Theater, Film, and Media from the Faculty of Arts at the University of Manitoba. He's going to be talking to us about petromimesis, carbon kinship, and reflections in stone. Please check back on our website for event details and to register for this event. Also upcoming in January, the very last day of January, the 31st, we will have the Stubbs Lecture in English Literature, which will be given by Claire Petit from Cambridge University in the UK. And Professor Petit is a specialist in the literary ideas of the 19th century, and her current work investigates the origins of the linked phenomena of structural racism, climate change, and nationalism. So again, stay tuned for her title and other details, which will be coming up soon. For your information, the UC Endowed Lectures are actually fantastic opportunities to hear from world-class scholars talking about the things that they are most passionate about. And I encourage you to come and join us again, and I hope I will see you there. Today's presentations were made possible by a team of many. Special thanks are extended to Melanie Newton for moderating, Bonnie Wang for running the technology that allowed this to be hybrid, all students, staff, and faculty involved with the planning of Dr. Smith's visit, and especially you, Matthew, for inspiring us with such a beautiful lecture, vibrant in its characterizations of a place and time, especially with the videos and your own photography. I found it riveting. And you've given us an eye on what's been happening in the Caribbean at an earlier point in time from the eyes from within. So none of us, I think, will ever think about the Caribbean with the same eyes anymore. For those of you who are here in person, I invite you all to go around the corner and join us for a small reception just next door in our senior common room. Please stay and enjoy some food and drink with us. Thank you very much, and that concludes our evening event.